Picture this, you buy your dream house, only to discover your neighbor has been secretly stealing from you for 3 entire years. Not just stealing, but stealing something so basic, so essential, that you use it every single day without thinking twice. Water. And when I found out what this old man had been doing behind my back, I didn't get mad. I got even. And with just one simple move, literally the turn of a single handle, I didn't just stop his theft. I completely destroyed his entire life. This is how patience, precision, and perfect timing can deliver the most satisfying justice you've ever heard. If you've ever felt that burning desire for justice when someone thinks they can take advantage of you, you need to hit that subscribe button right now. Smash that like button because this story proves that sometimes the universe has a twisted sense of humor when it comes to karma. And trust me, you're going to want to hear every single detail of how this played out. Let's dive in. Let me paint you a picture of where this story begins. I'm living in Asia, and I just scored what I thought was the deal of a lifetime. A house in the middle of the capital city, prime real estate, and I got it for an absolute steal because the previous owners, who happened to be family friends, needed cash urgently. They'd been living abroad for nearly 3 years, and honestly, it showed. When I first laid eyes on my new property, I knew I'd bought a fixer-upper. The previous owners had abandoned their renovation project halfway through, leaving behind a house that looked more like a construction site than a home. The main door wasn't even properly secured, just a flimsy padlock holding it shut. No real door lock, no security system, nothing. There wasn't even a gate around the property, meaning literally anyone could just stroll right onto my land whenever they felt like it. But hey, I'm a practical guy. I knew what I was getting into, and the price was right. Plus, I'm 6 feet tall with 3 dogs. I figured I could handle whatever challenges this neighborhood might throw at me. I should have known I was in for trouble on day one. I'm moving my stuff in, trying to get settled, when I walk into my own garage and find someone else's bike just sitting there like it owned the place. Can you imagine? I'm thinking to myself, welcome to the neighborhood, right? I wasn't about to start a confrontation on my first day, so I simply wheeled the bike out to the road and went about my business. That same day, I had a gate installed, first order of business, establish some boundaries. About 4 hours later, there's this angry pounding on my new gate. Through my window, I can see this furious man gesturing wildly, clearly looking for his bike. Now, I could have gone out there, explained the situation, maybe even apologized for the inconvenience. But something about his entitled attitude, the way he was banging on my gate like he had every right to be angry at me for moving his bike from my property, it rubbed me the wrong way. So I just ignored him. Watched through my window as he got more and more frustrated, and after about 15 minutes of this tantrum, he finally gave up, grabbed his bike from the road, and stormed off. That was my introduction to this charming neighborhood. Already, I'm thinking I might have made a mistake. But life settled into a routine. The biggest issue I had was people still treating my property like it was abandoned. Cars would park right in front of my gate, blocking me in, because they were used to this being a vacant lot they could use however they wanted. A simple no parking sign fixed that problem pretty quickly. For a few weeks, everything seemed fine. I'm getting settled, making plans for renovations, enjoying my new space. My 3 dogs were loving the yard, and despite the rocky start, I was beginning to feel optimistic about my investment. Then came last week. The week that changed everything. I'm in my bathroom, enjoying what should have been a relaxing shower after a long day, when I notice something odd. The water pressure is weaker than usual. Not drastically, but enough to be noticeable. You know that feeling when you're expecting a strong, steady stream and instead you get this pathetic trickle? It's annoying, but more than that, it's suspicious. That's when I heard it. The distinct sound of a water pump kicking on next door. Now, this wasn't just any neighbor, this was the old guy who lived in the 3-story house right beside me. The same old guy who, according to my friends who'd sold me the house, had been absolutely furious about the sale. He'd apparently voiced numerous concerns, complaints, and objections about the property changing hands. My friends had warned me about him, but honestly, I wasn't worried. Like I said, I'm a big guy with 3 dogs. What was he going to do? But now, standing in my shower with barely enough water pressure to rinse the shampoo from my hair, listening to his pump running at full blast, a suspicion started forming in my mind. Let me explain how water systems work in my country. When you have a multi-story building like his, 3 full floors with the ground floor being his residence and the upper 2 floors rented out to tenants, the public water supply doesn't have enough pressure to naturally push water up to the roof tanks. That's where the pump comes in. It draws water from the supply line and pushes it up to storage tanks on the roof, which then gravity feeds water down to all the floors. The timing was too perfect to be a coincidence. His pump kicks on, and suddenly my water pressure drops to almost nothing. But I'm a logical person. Coincidences do happen. Maybe there was an issue with the public supply that day. Maybe there was some work being done on the water lines. Maybe I was just being paranoid. So I decided to test my theory. I stood there in my bathroom, soap still in my hair, waiting. And waiting. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, his pump shut off. The moment, and I mean the very moment, that motor went silent, I turned on the taps throughout my house. Boom. Full pressure. Strong, steady flow from every single faucet. That's when it hit me like a freight train. This old man wasn't just an unfriendly neighbor. He was a thief. A water thief who had been stealing from me, or more accurately, stealing from the previous owners, for who knows how long. Suddenly, everything started making sense. My friends had mentioned that the water bills for this property had been climbing steadily over the 3 years the house sat empty. They'd assumed it was due to leaks, old pipes, abandoned property. These things happen. But the bills were higher than what you'd expect from normal leakage. Much higher. Now I knew why. At some point during those 3 years, this entitled old miser had decided he didn't want to pay for his own water anymore. So he'd waltzed onto my property, and somehow tapped into my water line. He'd been siphoning water for his entire 3-story building, including supplying water to his paying tenants, all while my friends footed the bill. I spent the next hour searching every inch of my property, trying to find where exactly he'd made his connection. But this guy was crafty. He'd hidden his handiwork well. I couldn't find the physical tap point, but I didn't need to. I'd tested my theory multiple times now, and the evidence was undeniable. Every time his pump ran, my pressure dropped. Every time his pump stopped, my pressure returned to normal. For the next few days, I sat with this knowledge, turning over my options. I could confront him directly, march over there and demand he disconnect from my line immediately. But what if he denied it? What if he got defensive and made my life difficult? I could go the legal route, file a police complaint, maybe sue him for the stolen water. But legal battles are expensive and time-consuming, and honestly, water is cheap in my country. Even with his theft, my monthly bill was only about $5, including washing 3 dogs, a car every week, and maintaining my garden. But here's the thing, it wasn't about the money. It wasn't about the $5 water bill or even the years of bills my friends had overpaid. It was about the principle. It was about this entitled old man who thought he could just help himself to other people's resources without consequence. It was about the audacity, the complete disrespect for property rights, for basic decency. This man had spent 3 years stealing from my property, probably laughing to himself about how clever he was, how he'd found a way to get free water for his entire building while some absent property owners paid the bill. Well, I was about to teach him that every action has consequences, and sometimes those consequences come when you least expect them. The beautiful thing about my plan was its simplicity. I didn't need to break any laws. I didn't need to set foot on his property. I didn't need to confront him or hire lawyers or file complaints. All I needed to do was exercise my absolute right to control the water supply to my own property. So on Monday morning, 4 days ago, I put my plan into action. I positioned myself near my water main, and I waited. Like a predator waiting for the perfect moment to strike, I listened for the telltale sound of his pump kicking on. There it was. the motor humming to life, preparing to steal another day's worth of water from my supply. But not today. Today, the tables were about to turn. I reached for my water main valve and turned it off. Just like that. One simple turn of a handle, and his entire operation came to a grinding halt. Now, here's where my basic understanding of water pumps became absolutely crucial. See, household water tanks in my country operate on a pretty simple principle. There's a ball valve inside the tank that acts like a float. When the water level drops, the ball drops, opening the valve and sending an electronic signal to the pump, start pumping. When the tank fills up, the ball rises, closes the valve, and tells the pump to shut off. But what happens when the pump is running, trying to fill the tank, but no water is coming through because some inconsiderate neighbor has shut off the supply? The ball valve stays open. The electronic signal keeps telling the pump to run. And the pump, like an obedient soldier following orders, keeps running and running and running. Here's what I expected to happen: the pump would burn out from running dry. No water to cool it, no water to lubricate the internal components. It would overheat, seize up, and die. That would teach him a lesson and cost him a few $100s to replace. What I didn't expect, what I couldn't have possibly anticipated, was the cascading disaster that was about to unfold. You see, this old miser had another problem I didn't know about. His house was still running on electrical wiring from the 1990s. Ancient by today's standards, and definitely not designed to handle a motor running continuously at full load for hours and hours. As his pump ran through the night, desperately trying to push non-existent water up to his tanks, it was drawing maximum power continuously. The old wiring began to heat up. Circuits that were designed for intermittent use were suddenly under constant, maximum load. At approximately 3 a.m., I was jolted awake by the sound of voices. Panicked, confused voices coming from the house next door. I could hear people moving around, doors opening and closing, the unmistakable sounds of people trying to figure out what had gone wrong. That's when I realized my simple plan had become something much more dramatic. The continuous power draw from his struggling pump had overloaded his outdated electrical system. Fuses had blown. Circuits had failed. And in that cascading electrical failure, he'd lost not just his water pump, he'd lost power to his entire house. Picture this scene: it's 3 a.m. His two tenants, who pay good money to live in his building, wake up to find themselves without water or electricity. In a neighborhood where every other house has power, where every other house has water, they're sitting in the dark, wondering what kind of landlord can't even keep the basic utilities running. And that's when things got really interesting for this old water thief. You see, tenant protection laws in my country take utilities very seriously. Power and water aren't considered luxuries or conveniences, they're classified as essential services. A landlord who fails to provide these services isn't just being negligent, they're violating the law. And unless the outage is due to weather, natural disasters, or other unavoidable circumstances, the landlord is fully liable. The tenants, understandably furious about being left without basic services in the middle of the night, weren't in a forgiving mood when morning came. They demanded answers. They demanded immediate restoration of services. And when their landlord couldn't provide either, they took action. One tenant packed up and moved out just 2 days later, the moment it became clear that water and power wouldn't be restored immediately. Can you blame them? They were paying for a place to live, not a primitive camping experience. But it gets better. Both tenants filed formal complaints with the police. And here's where the beauty of the law comes into play. When a person is in clear breach of tenant protection laws, police have the authority to issue fines and penalties without waiting for a court judgment. The landlord can challenge these penalties in court if they think they're unfair, but they still have to pay up front and hope for a refund later if they win. So now my water-stealing neighbor found himself facing a perfect storm of consequences. Both tenants gone, meaning zero rental income. A fine of $500, which might not sound like much, but in our country's economy, that's substantial money, especially for a retired mechanic living on a fixed income. He had to refund security deposits to both tenants. And he couldn't rent the units out again until both the water and electrical problems were fixed, which would cost him even more money. The cherry on top? The repairs weren't just a matter of calling an electrician and a plumber. His electrical system needed to be brought up to modern standards to prevent this from happening again. His water system needed to be completely redesigned to work independently, without relying on stolen water from next door. We're talking about thousands of dollars in repairs, and all the while, no rental income coming in. By Thursday, I learned through the neighborhood gossip network that he was packing up his belongings. By Friday, it was confirmed. He couldn't afford to live in his own house anymore. Without the rental income from his tenants, he didn't have enough money to cover his basic living expenses, let alone fund major electrical and plumbing repairs. This past Sunday, just 3 days ago, I watched through my window as he loaded his remaining possessions into his daughter's car. The proud, entitled old man who thought he could steal from his neighbors with impunity was being forced to move in with family, his independence and his rental business empire destroyed. But the story doesn't end there. Because this old thief wasn't completely stupid. He'd figured out what had caused his pump to run continuously. He'd discovered that the lack of water flow had triggered the cascade of failures that destroyed his life. And he had questions. Yesterday morning, there was a knock at my gate. There he stood, looking older somehow, defeated. His voice was calm, controlled, but I could see the struggle behind his eyes. "Did you turn off your water supply the other night?" he asked. Now, this was the moment of truth. I could have gloated. I could have admitted everything and let him know exactly what I thought of water thieves. But that wouldn't have been smart. Instead, I looked him straight in the eye and delivered the performance of my life. "Oh yeah," I said, with just the right amount of casual concern. My tank developed a new leak in one of the pipes, and I had to shut off the supply until the plumber could come by the next day to fix it. "Sorry, did that cause you any problems?" The look on his face was absolutely priceless. He kept his expression neutral, but I could see everything happening behind his eyes. The realization. The understanding that his years of theft had finally caught up with him. The knowledge that his own greed had created the perfect conditions for his downfall. "Oh, okay," he managed to say. Just 2 words, but they carried the weight of complete defeat. He turned and walked away, and I haven't seen him since. I don't think he knows for certain that I know about his water theft, but I also don't think he's stupid enough to believe my plumbing story. He knows what happened. He knows why it happened. And he knows there's absolutely nothing he can do about it. The beautiful irony is that even if he wanted revenge, even if he wanted to expose my role in his downfall, what would he say? "Officer, I'd like to report my neighbor for turning off his own water supply, which prevented me from continuing to steal from him." Good luck with that conversation. And that's the most satisfying part of this entire story. Justice wasn't served by lawyers or police officers or judges. It was served by simple physics, outdated electrical systems, and one man's greed becoming the architect of his own destruction. I didn't destroy his life, he destroyed his own life by building it on a foundation of theft and entitlement. This week, I'm having a plumber come out to review all my water lines and remove any connections that extend beyond my property boundaries. I'm solving my water theft problem permanently while ensuring this can never happen to me again. 2 birds, 1 stone, and one very expensive lesson learned by a former neighbor who thought he could steal without consequences. Sometimes the most effective revenge isn't about what you do to someone else. Sometimes it's about simply stopping them from doing what they shouldn't have been doing in the first place. Sometimes justice looks like letting someone's own choices catch up with them in spectacular fashion. If this story gave you that sweet taste of justice satisfaction, smash that like button and let me know in the comments what you think about neighbors who think they can just help themselves to whatever they want. Have you ever dealt with entitled neighbors who thought the rules didn't apply to them? Share your stories below. And if you want more tales of perfectly executed revenge and karma coming full circle, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. Until then, remember, what goes around, comes around, and sometimes it comes around with interest.